So if I crouch, I think you can see all three records that I'm going to talk about today. Anyways, let's get going. Welcome to Oblivion Corner and the first episode of Digger's Dilemma. The reason why I have a dilemma is that I'm trying to pare down my record collection a little bit, and so I'm going to talk about these three records. I'll show them in detail in a little bit, but at least one of these has to go. So I'm going to start with actually the record that I'm blocking with my head, which is by Alden Tyrell. It's called Disco Lunar Module. I believe it came out in 2004. So one interesting thing about this record is that the A-side runs at 45 RPM, while the B-side runs at 33 RPM. So the A-side is the title track, Lunar Disco Module, which is a very moody and driving electro-disco jam. Definitely hits hard, both on the dance floor, but also in terms of drama and synth melody for home listening. Since the B-side is cut at 33 RPM, that leaves space for two tracks, and they're called Knockers and Rendezvous at Rimini. So the first track on the B-side has a lot of dance floor panache. Reminds me a little bit of a Patrick Cowley synth disco banger, something like Megatron Man. And then the second track, Rendezvous at Rimini, is a sort of almost like a over-the-top synth disco, Italo disco instrumental that I always weirdly in my mind associate with this old Laserdisc 8-bit game. It was this weird game called Starfighters on a Japanese home computer called the MSX, which would be paired with a Laserdisc player. So you had this combination of 8-bit graphics, but then these interactive sequences that were rendered in 80s workstations and mainframes, which look incredible and cinematic, but it was this weird multimedia combination of 8-bit computer graphics and pre-rendered super early CGI, which weirdly is kind of intertwined with this second track on the B-side for me. So the next record I'm going to talk about is this one right here. It's by Wright, and it's called Lovin Is Really My Game. It's on TK Disco, as you can see from the very distinctive label. It's a disco track from 1978. It's a track that's grown on me actually the more that I've listened to it. There's like no standout hook, but just a lot of neat songwriting moments which build up as you listen to it more and more. Actually, both the intro and the breakdown, I think, are extremely sampleable, if that's a word. But they really could be isolated and something else could be built from them. So why am I considering this record for the axe? Well, not the axe, but to sell on to another disco enthusiast. So it has two sides. One side is the vocal track, and then the second side is the vocal track with audience sounds. It's exactly the same track. It's just if you want to kind of have some canned stadium audience ambiance, if you will, then that's cool. But to me, it would be a much more interesting record if it was vocal and instrumental. And finally, I'm going to talk about the last record on display here, which is some Dutch new wave from the late 70s as well, from 78. So the Wright record and this record here, which is by Gruppo Sportivo, which is a Dutch new wave band, are both pretty much a year apart, which is very interesting because they do kind of come from opposite ends of the world, from very different sides of the music spectrum. This is a full album. It's called 10 Mistakes. So I got this album actually because the first track, Beep Beep Love, which was a hit I actually heard on a New Wave Classics, I think it was called. Yeah, New Wave Classics compilation. It was on a label called Antler Subway, I think. And it was like a sort of new wave and sort of cold wave compilation, and that Beep Beep Love track stuck out because it sounded kind of very retro, very sort of bubblegum pop. So it caught my attention. So then when I found, you know, the album with that track, I had to get it. I mean, this is a pretty strong album. There are a couple of other good tracks. Superman comes to mind. Girls Never Know, which have that bubblegum pop, male-female vocal dynamic, which is very enjoyable. There's a couple of maybe filler tracks or tracks that I don't enjoy as much, but overall I would say as an album it's definitely pretty strong. So starting off, I think there is one record that I definitely want to keep. It's the Alden Tyrell Disco Lunar module. For a fact, I know that's the one that's staying. The Betty Wright record, I like the track in its original form without any audience sounds. And the album has some strong tracks, but it's not the types of records that I look out for. Having a new wave rock record doesn't make a lot of sense to me. At the same time, having a record where only one side is good, also something that I can't justify. So I think that the digger's dilemma has been solved, and it involves selling on these two records. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing if you'd like to see more talks about random vinyl records. Have a good one.